Going to hone in this morning on one verse at the beginning of our lesson and the same verse at the end of our lesson. And I hope that a word from that verse reverberates through your ear all through the lesson and throughout the afternoon. One of the most important words in our language, one of the most important words in the Bible. And it's in Matthew chapter 16 when Jesus said, "What good will it be for someone to gain the whole world, yet forfeit their soul?" And then you're going to see that same word a second time. Or what can anyone give in exchange for their soul? Now, one of the most important words in the Bible is this word soul. We throw that word around a lot. But if someone were to ask you what the word soul means, what would you say? If I say I am a soul man, well, then it's true, because I have visual evidence to prove it from last week's trunk or treat. But if I say I am a soul man, or I say you are a soul woman, what exactly does that mean? You say, we know it matters, that word soul. We suspect that it's very important, but it's sort of hard to define, isn't it? We're not exactly sure what it means. And yet it's a word that won't go away either. Even though it's used a little less and less in the 21st century than it has been in the preceding centuries, it's a word that just won't go away. From birth to our final resting place, in which we say of someone, "May God rest his soul." What exactly do we mean? How many of our children have learned this prayer? How many of us have prayed this prayer with our children at bedtime or prayed it ourselves? "Now I lay me down to sleep. I pray the Lord my soul to keep. If I should die before I wake, I pray the Lord my soul to take." It hit me a few years ago after praying that with my children one evening that I didn't much like that prayer. Has it ever struck anybody else that maybe if you're praying with a 5-year-old, that could leave a 5-year-old with maybe just a tad bit of anxiety? If I should die before I wake? And so some people have changed it to, "Now I lay me down to sleep. I pray the Lord my soul to keep. Angels watch me through the night and wake me in the morning light." I like that one a little better, actually. But what does it mean to ask God to watch my soul? What does it mean to ask God, my soul to keep? If I expire before sunrise and he takes my soul, just what is it exactly that has been taken? It's a good question. This man's name, this is a very prominent man, this man's name is Dr. Jeffrey Boyd. He's a Yale psychiatrist, an ordained minister, and he is the co-author of the Diagnostic and Statistic Manual of Mental Disorders. So if you're messed up in the head, he can tell you exactly what it is. And in some of his books, he tries to bring the word soul into the scientific vocabulary. And it's really sort of hard to do. In one study of hundreds of church attenders, Boyd found that most people believe they know what soul means, but when they are asked to explain it, they couldn't quite do it. The soul, it seems, sort of turns out to be like the Supreme Court Associate Judge Potter Stewart's description of obscenity a few years ago. It's hard to define, but I know it when I see it. Maybe the soul is a little bit like that, because you see, the soul just can't be put under a microscope. The soul cannot be studied by x-ray. We know it's there, but you can't weigh it. You can't see it. You can't examine it. About 100 years ago, a doctor measured the slight weight loss experienced by 7 tuberculosis victims at the moment of death, and he noticed that each of the 7 of them weighed exactly 21 grams less at the moment of death. And so he postured that maybe the soul weighs 21 grams, but it was never duplicated, and it was widely ridiculed in the medical community. But Boyd, in his books, argues that we see people who have a strength of soul, that simply will not be degraded by any humiliation and pain and suffering that their body puts them through. So there's got to be something to it, this soul. And in one of his books, he writes of a woman named Patricia who suffered from the effects of diabetes, a heart attack, 2 strokes. She went blind. Then she went into renal failure, which required dialysis. She had both of her legs amputated, all while she was in her 30s. She was placed in a nursing home except for those several times a year where she had to be hospitalized. And sometimes when she was in the hospital, she had to be placed into a coma. And she spent the rest of her life in and out of a nursing home and a hospital. She was also part of a church in Washington, D.C. that wanted to create a homeless shelter. They didn't have anybody with the leadership skills to pull it off or who would volunteer, so Pat volunteered. And she organized this massive homeless shelter project from her nursing home room. In between her dialysis and her amputations and her comas, she pulled together the team and got the zoning done and got the architectural work done and the fundraising done. And she then helped the team figure out the rules for the homeless people who used the shelter. And then she recruited and personally trained from the nursing home the staff who was going to be in the shelter. When she died, after the shelter's first successful year of service, homeless people stood at her memorial in line along with members of the United States House of Representatives and 2 United States senators and James Baker, the United States Secretary of State, honoring her for her achievement. And Boyd wrote of her, "The soul knows a glory that the body cannot rob." In fact, he wrote, in some ways, the more the body revolts, the more the soul rallies. I think faithful Christians know something about that. I think they do. You see, there are people today who claim you have no soul. There are unbelievers, agnostics, who claim you have no soul, there is no such thing. All you are is your body. But Pat herself said one time, the only thing I can depend on with my body is that it will fail me. The only thing I can depend on with my body is that it will let me down. Somehow my body contains me, but it is not me. Now ponder that a moment, if you will. Could you say that? Somehow my body contains me, but it is not me. The part of you that matters is the part of you that will live forever. Your soul. We can't seem to talk about beauty or art without talking about the soul. We definitely can't talk about music without talking about the soul. There's the queen of soul, Aretha Franklin. It's possible that if your soul isn't moved by Ray Charles or Louis Armstrong, you may want to check and make sure you have a pulse. It was a 16-year-old girl, a wannabe pop singer who was named Jewel. She hitchhiked to Mexico and watched desperate people looking for help and wrote what would become her breakthrough and signature song, Who Will Save Your Soul? We know it's important. We know it's important in every area of life. We need the word soul when we speak not only of the highest forms of human existence, but even the lowest forms of human existence. For instance, in the classic, phenomenal book, The Souls of Black Folk, written over 100 years ago by Du Bois, he talked about the oppressed humanity of a race. And he called it the souls of black folk. No other word would quite do. The selves of black folk just wouldn't work, would it? When we talk about tasty food that anybody with good sense loves, we think about soul food. Who doesn't love it? Soul, brother, reflects the bond that knits together those who were persecuted because of skin color. They're a soul, brother. We speak of larger entities having soul. During every election, politicians and pundits of all parties warn us that the soul of America is at stake. About 30 years ago, Jack Canfield wrote his first book called Chicken Soup for the Soul. There are now 250 books in that collection of inspirational true stories compiled by Mark Victor Hansen and Jack Canfield. Stories that motivate and inspire the soul for every category of thought or person you can think of. For many years, Derek Jeter, the shortstop of the New York Yankees, was called the soul of the New York Yankees. And Tom Brady, who was the quarterback for the New England Patriots, was called the soul of the Patriots. By the way, that's Jeter's home in Tampa Bay on not Amelia Island, the island where the General Hospital is. His home that he sold to Brady when Brady went to Tampa Bay. But we sometimes think of athletes as the soul of their team. Look, all of these words may be metaphors, but they point to the notion of the soul as being something that holds things together. We speak of the soul as a source of strength, and we speak of it as fragile. Which is it? Well, it can be both, can it? I've known people for whom their soul was the greatest source of strength in their life. I've known people whose soul was fragile. Something about the soul always seems to be at risk. A soul is something that can be lost, or some say a soul is something that can be sold. The selling of a soul has been made into countless operas and books, and certainly country music lyrics, as well as a movie named Bedazzled, and a musical in a movie named Damn Yankees. Periodically, somebody tries to sell their soul on eBay. I'm not kidding you. It's happened many times. And it ended when a woman named Lori offered her soul on eBay for $2,000 after a car accident left her strapped for cash. No takers, though. And eBay finally said, we're going to have a no soul selling policy. For one thing, it allows us to stay neutral on the existence of souls. If souls don't exist, they don't allow the selling of non-existent items. If souls do exist, they don't allow people to sell off parts of their body one at a time. The real problem, they said, is if you sell something on eBay, you have to be in position to deliver what you sell. So no longer can you try to sell your soul on eBay. To live with a person who doesn't seem to have a soul is torturous living. You ever heard somebody say, have you no soul? What are they saying? They're saying, do you not have any sense of morals or ethics or values? Do you not have a sense of conscience that is even troubled by what your will has chosen and what your body has carried out? Does an unborn baby have a soul? Well, a whole debate takes place in religion and in science and in politics over that one question. Does an unborn baby or does a fetus have a soul? Does life begin at conception or somewhere in between birth? Is that when a person becomes a human and has a soul? I mean, we just can't escape this thought and word soul. We may not be exactly sure what the soul is, but the word sells. Advertisers speak of cars being soulful. Kia actually sells a car called the Kia Soul. Must be pretty cool to own a Kia Soul. Has anybody in here ever owned a Kia Soul? See, you have a soul. This was my first car. This is a 1963 Rambler. So I guess you could say I was a rambling soul. I certainly was not a very cool soul. That's for certain. We speak of the eyes as being the window to the soul. Scientists say our eyes can reveal our inner thoughts. For instance, when people are doing hard mental work, their eyes dilate. There's been a lot of study on this. In fact, one study talked about researchers monitoring the eyes of students trying to solve difficult math problems, and they would sometimes surprise subjects by asking them, "Why did you give up just now?" And the student said, "How did you know I gave up right now?" And they said, "Your eyes dilated. We have a window to your soul." Are the eyes really a window to your soul? When George W. Bush was president, he created a big controversy by saying that in nuclear discussions with Russia, he looked right into the eyes of Vladimir Putin, and well, it'd be better to watch it.
We had a very good dialogue. I was able to get a sense of his soul. He's a man deeply committed to his country and the best interests of his country.
All right, so he said, I was able to get a sense of his soul. A few months later, Senator John McCain said, well, when I looked in Putin's eyes, I saw something too.
I looked into Putin's eyes, I saw 3 letters, a K, a G, and a B.
He looked into Putin's eyes and he saw 3 letters, K, G, and B, for the old Soviet security agency that Putin headed up. We often can't talk about our work without talking about souls. A soulful work suggests that we are doing something more important, more efficient. You ever thought about this? My soul is weary. Heard people say that? I have. My soul is weary. What are they describing? They're describing something far deeper than physical exhaustion. They haven't just run a marathon. They're describing something deeper, more serious that needs greater attention. Churches are supposed to know all about souls. We often sing a song that originated as a psalm. And so Hogan read the first few verses of that psalm for us this morning, and then we sang the words to "Bless the Lord, O my soul. Worship his holy name." Certain people are highly regarded as soul winners. People who are especially proficient at teaching other people about Jesus and bringing them to a decision for Christ. The best soul winner I think I ever met was our own Jerry Tallman, who passed away a couple of years ago. Jerry Tallman was a soul winner, if I have ever known a soul winner. The universal distress signal is SOS. It stands for Save Our Souls. Well, what does that mean? To save our souls. In fact, usually it means save our bodies. Because if you're rescued off a ship, it didn't do anything for your soul. It saved your bodies. Do you remember that woman named Pat that I described a few moments ago, whose body betrayed a glorious soul inside of it? Well, what Jeffrey Boyd did not write in that particular story is that Pat was his wife. And watching her body crumble, he watched something deeper than a body. He watched a soul that was extraordinarily beautiful. And anybody can have that kind of soul. Not all of us can have beautiful bodies. All of us can have a beautiful soul. If I should die before I wake, I pray the Lord my soul to take. What is the soul? It is the part of us that is eternal. It is the seat of everything that is eternally important and significant. It's what Jesus said of, what does a man profit if he gains the whole world and loses his own soul? What will a man give in exchange for his soul? A few years ago, country singer Tim McGraw had a great song entitled "Live Like You Were Dying." It's the story of a man in his 40s who learns that his father has a terminal illness. And his father's message is to live life every day to the fullest and not waste your life and live every day like you were dying. And the amazing thing about that is, about a year before Tim McGraw recorded that song, his dad, who was a very famous Major League Baseball pitcher, Tug McGraw, had developed cancer. And so during that year, father and son who had not been particularly close for many years for a variety of reasons became closer. They started doing some of the very things that the song spoke of. And Tim recorded the hit song. I went skydiving. I went Rocky Mountain climbing. I went 2.7 seconds on a bull named Fu Manchu. And I loved deeper, and I spoke sweeter, and I gave forgiveness I'd been denying. And then later on in the song, he said, someday I hope you get the chance to live like you were dying, like tomorrow was a gift, and you've got eternity to think about. What did you do with it? What could you do with it? What did I do with it? What would I do with it? And you know as well as I do that country music is mostly about fun and games, and the first few things were about fun. I found out I only had a year left to live, so I went skydiving, and I went Rocky Mountain climbing, and I got on a bull. But the real issue is, and you've got eternity to think about. What did you do with it? What could you do with it? What did I do with it? What would I do with it? And everybody has to answer those questions. Everybody has a soul. So everybody has to answer those questions. And to not answer them is to answer them. And so we not only have to answer those questions, but we have to answer two more questions posted by Jesus to his disciples. What is it worth if you gain the whole world but lose your own soul? What would you give in exchange for your soul? You see, I'm a soul man, not just in trunk or treat. I'm a soul man every day of my life. And you're either a soul man or a soul woman every day of your life. Living within you is a part of you that will live forever. And there should be nothing that you would give in exchange for it. Nothing in the whole world, even the whole world, that is worth losing your eternal soul. Give your soul, your ultimate thoughts?